Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is going to be a speed VOD review of the LEC Finals. This is between G2 and Fnatic, and as per request, it's going to be on ×2 speed. We're just going to get into things. I have no idea if I'm going to be impressed or not, and we'll see how this is. Now, I do want to say, as I'm getting into this, that I have been spoilered the amount of games that the series does have, but because I wanted these VOD reviews to be fresh, and for me not to know what would be happening inside of the games, from the champion selection, the draft, all that, I am going in completely blind, and so we should just take a look at stuff. So the Aatrox getting banned away first is really bizarre to me. I've talked about this a lot on LCK casts recently, where I do not think that the champion is that good. But this is stuff that I'm saying in a vacuum. I don't know how it pertains really to these two teams in particular, due to not watching enough games of the region. Twisted Fate ban is also really strange. Kiana ban, I guess, is potentially standard, but these two stand out as really bizarre to me just off the bat. Yasuo then being banned away. I guess perhaps they can play Gragas Yasuo, or maybe there's even more stuff that's going on. But the Yasuo would have to come in blind. Forceful team compositions like Yasuo means that red side should be able to respond to it, and so it's very peculiar to me that rather than just coming up with answers to team compositions like that, you would choose to ban it out, especially if you have preparation coming into the finals. It's one of the things that I criticize a lot of teams for in the LCK, when they ban champions that should otherwise be able to be countered, and thus the Aatrox even would be a pretty poor red side ban. But it's going to be Pyke first. In Pyke's current state, he can only really go bot lane. He can't really go anywhere else. Pyke is extremely versatile and flexible, but still does follow a certain theme in terms of his color, or his color wheel, which is going to be something that I make another video on probably in the future. I think of drafts in League of Legends very much like trading card games, where certain characters just have very clear defined characteristics that clearly has defined synergy and approach to like a deck construction or a deck in nature, and thus seeing Pyke is somewhat flexible. Akali ends up getting picked up by Fnatic. And then the Sylas is picked up. So these are two champions that are able to be semi-drafted around. As then Kled is picked up as well. And we're just running through this situation right now. Now the Kled is really forceful. And it forces the nature of the Pyke, because the Kled's interesting in the sense that it's essentially red-green. He needs to be aggressive, he needs to spike, he needs to have strength come out inside of the mid-game and the mid to late transition. He has play-arounds that he can do if the enemy team only has like one teleport or something, because Kled's ultimate is so fast. But he does follow the theme of red-green. If you're a Magic the Gathering player and you're watching this or something, and what I mean by that is he follows a very aggressive theme. He follows a theme that has harmony or synergy inside of it, where he's surrounded by champions that share a similar mindset with what he is really trying to accomplish at certain breakpoints inside of the game. And so Pyke, even though Pyke has versatility in terms of what he's able to do at certain stages of the game, he's able to potentially just be a roaming support in early on, or he's able to play into the laning phase and then come online in the mid-game transition. He's also able to do things in the later stages of the game depending on what the enemy team composition is. So in that regard, he's a little bit more flexible. Gragas, likewise, able to mix up things. He's able to be paired with AD top and mid laner, in which case you can't have a resistance really against Gragas. He's able to go Glass Cannon in the AP department, and then he's really scary. Because it makes it very difficult to itemize against him, and he also has versatility in the sense that he's paired pretty well with some other meta champions right now in the meta. So the Kled, however, forces Pyke's hand, and then it is likely forcing Gragas' hand in the direction that we just talked about. And so if you're a Fnatic, you should try to recalibrate draft at this point, because this is a very forceful face-up selection, and it's not like it's too late for Fnatic to try to adjust, because already you know that thematically these 3 champions are coming into you, and there's going to be very little wiggle room for them to do anything else. And then because Fnatic is red side, and you consider the way that the map layout is, and Baron's right here, the red side jungle, etc., any team that you can have that can sort of turtle this sort of a concave with obviously the tier 2 turrets and whatnot, red side jungle, and, you know, wraiths and whatnot, yada yada yada, you can potentially just try to recalibrate to outscale the opposition, even though you already have the Akali and the Sylas in. But we'll continue on. And Xayah gets picked up, so it is a scaling kind of champion. There's obviously other options that are available right now. And so now, at this point of the game, all that you really want to do is deny any way from them to try to phase out of the color scheme or the color wheel that they are committed into, because the 3 picks are way too forceful that don't really allow any wiggle room or any way back into a different color. It doesn't allow them to opt out. You should incentivize them to stay on theme and then respond to that theme right here, because they committed too heavily early on. And so we'll see what their bans end up being. I won't go super in-depth into the draft. This is just a rudimentary explanation on how G2's way too heavily committed too early on that allows responses. The Syndra is a pick that's a little bit bizarre, because again, we just talked about how you should incentivize them to go into such a theme, but perhaps this is something in specific with G2. I do know that there's the comments about like perks playing a Syndra and whatnot, so maybe it has something to do with that. The Ezreal is a recalibration that G2 would not like to do. When you think about Ezreal and how he's going to fit in with the likely mid laner that's going to come on, even though he has hybrid damage and whatnot, he's off theme with the remaining champions on G2, and the way that you would end up drafting as Fnatic, Ezreal's not really that much of a concern for you. So even though Ezreal in himself is a strong champion, thematically he doesn't fit in with what G2 is trying to do. And if you ever look at trading card games, you know what I'm talking about. Ezreal's a really strong card. It doesn't mean that he slots in with this kind of a deck. At this point, you want to try to conceal as much information as possible. Sylas is able to go mid, jungle, and top. Akali is able to go mid and top, or mid and top. And so you should always pick the support champion to reserve and conceal where these 2 champions are going, so that you can get absolute maximum information out of your opponents before selecting whatever the final thing is. You have to know that the support champion that you are picking has to resist against red-green type themed colors, and then just play around it with your final pick. They're hovering Morgana right now. I don't know why it's not starting. Sorry. And they continue full on into the aggression, right? So everything here is actually on color. Every single one of these champions can't afford to fall behind. They are designed to try to win lane. They are designed to try to get ahead. When you think about the routes in terms of the early opening map that Gragas has available to him, he's going to have quite a lot of potential routes available, which also makes early game warding a little bit problematic. But obviously the least versatile route will be anyone that entertains mid, unless LeBlanc just gets early priority, depending on what's going to happen levels 1, 2, and 3, and then that can obviously influence Gragas' ability to get certain scuttle crabs and how he's going to open up his pathing. So when the Kled is here, the LeBlanc's here, the Lucian's here, again, all you have to do is choose a champion that is semi-mid-rangey and can go into the later stages of the game, and then you're going to be perfectly fine, given how it is. I'm not going to talk about possible champion selections, although a champion that really hurts this team composition, but the issue is that because you have the Sylas and the Akali, it's a lot of magic. would be something like Lissandra in a spot like this. And you'll notice that if Lissandra comes in here, the Zanya's Hourglass, the stopwatch, the natural tendency to itemize with armor, and the defensiveness plays into shutting down the short range on Lucian, playing into shut down the Kled inside of the red side jungle, plays into annoying the Gragas, outright counteracts the LeBlanc, problematically, or not problematically, creates problems for Kled, not Kled, jeez, Pyke in the later stages of the game, and makes the Kled ultimates very awkward if they're playing a turtley type of style. But in a situation like this, you do have to ask yourself if you're fine with that much magic damage, and then I think that the Xayah is perfectly fine in terms of physical damage. But also, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of magic resist can these champions end up building? Well, Gragas can probably end up getting the Banshee's Veil in the later stages. The LeBlanc is also probably able to get the Banshee's Veil. The Lucian is able to get magic resist, but the issue is that the magic resist that he ends up getting is not super important. He's going to get a Quicksilver Sash, and then as long as you have the Lissandra present, and then in addition to that, does he want another MR item? This is actually quite a big stun, and it's not really that applicable in terms of pro-level play to theoretically think that, okay, well, Lucian's going to go here. Because realistically, if you slot in Lissandra in a spot like this, the game is mostly going to be decided by 2 items, where if this team composition hasn't found a way to win, and then this team composition continues to play defensive, they'll naturally just override the opposition despite even maybe gold deficits or something. So we'll see what they end up slotting or picking. Is that a Jax? What? Alright, well. The Jax is off theme. The Jax gives in to what this team is trying to do, and it's trying to fight fire with fire. So this is an example of a team drafting to what they want to do, rather than recalibrating their draft relative to their opponent showing so much information face up early without an ability to really pivot out of it. So it's really strange. Jax, some people are saying right now that he's a late game champion, and that's not just what you want to think about. You don't just think, well, let's just get a super late game champion that can do stuff, because you also want a champion that can interrupt and play against different angles of what the opponent's team composition has. And it's not that Jax is necessarily atrocious, but the thing that I mentioned in regards to Lissandra, she's just so much more flexible, she's so much more obnoxious, she's so much better at slowing things down with a lot less volatility. And so now we can talk about what both team compositions want to do. So the Gragas' early opening routes are semi-important. Gragas obviously has the onus on him to make sure that something gets started in all 3 of the lanes. This is a very aggressive team composition that needs to be ahead in gold when it comes to the mid-game, because it doesn't scale nearly as much as the Fnatic team comp, and thus it doesn't have very many legs to stand on. It also needs to RNG good dragons like Infernal and Mountain. Drakes like Cloud Drake, Drakes like Ocean Dragon are not really that beneficial to it. If you think to yourself, what's going to happen when Lucian has 2 items, LeBlanc has 2.5 items, Kled is at 2.5 items or something like that, and then Gragas is at 1.5 to 2 items, etc., and they're all posturing around mid and around the Baron area and whatnot. How do they really perforate the red side jungle outside of a Kled ultimate that just sort of runs in and barrels down, and then Leona and Xayah plays defensive, and Akali uses defensive shrouds, and Sylas uses defensive abilities, all the while just trying to scale up from this area, because this is basically the ideal area of the map where Fnatic just doesn't have any obligation to do anything. Inaction is action due to the nature of their team composition and the fact that their team composition requires less gold to operate than the opponent. You can see this in many different types of esports games. You can mostly see it in StarCraft. You can also see it in Warcraft 3. This is much akin to a Zerg-like playstyle of scaling up to Defilers or something of that nature. So that's the problem for G2. So they have a stopwatch on them, or not a stopwatch, they have a, a stopwatch that is ticking on them, and a need to get ahead. And again, this is all assuming even skill level of the teams. Obviously, I wouldn't be saying this if G2 was playing against FlyQuest or something in an A. This would probably just be completely fine. So again, just assuming even level, if it's G2 versus G2, G2 Fnatic or something like that, if we can assume that both parties are equal, that's fine. On the flip side, everything that Fnatic would want to do in a vacuum is now irrelevant to them, because the only thing that Fnatic actually have to do is ask themselves, what does G2 need to happen? And then all they have to do is resist it. And so everything outside of that doesn't really matter. Ideally, obviously, Akali scales up in this situation to 3 items, because that threshold becomes very awkward, because we've already talked about the itemization for Lucian gets awkward for resisting anything, because they need to go full-on aggression. They need to keep scaling into the mid-game power spikes and whatnot, and they have to accelerate advantages off of that. The Xayah can go all the way up to 6 items. In this particular team comp, Jax can go all the way up to 6 items, and then Sylas is just going to do his role. Pyke is obviously really interesting, the way that he does fit in. There's not really clear defined ways of slowing him down for Fnatic, like I mentioned, in terms of like holding him down, other than just outplaying him inside of team fights on a mechanical level. So we can get into the game now. So times to review. It is so much harder to win this game if you're G2. It requires you to outplay your opponents, requires your opponents to make mistakes. I hate drafts like this all around the board. There's no insurance policies. Gragas opens Raptors into Golems. Mickey ends up dying, and that's obviously a nightmare. Gragas was coming bottom, but let's take a look at something as Gragas is coming bottom, okay? So Gragas is doing his Golems, and then after his Golems, you have to ask yourself, what is the route that Jankos wants to do? Now, here's the thing, okay? Jankos is in close proximity to bottom. The lane is already pushing into Reckless and Hylissang. So Gragas doesn't have the ability to just do this, unless they intend to utilize the prio to back up Gragas and invade the blue, because LeBlanc has priority, she can play right pocket, and then they assume that Sylas would do something like this. If that would be the case, then Gragas staying around bot side and whatnot is completely okay. If it's not the case, then it means that the bot lane jungle coordination is not on par. If they know that there's no way that Fnatic has any way to resist something as simple as this at level 2, if they would allow the second and third wave to come in to around this location, then Gragas can actually just do a 3 camp into bottom, and then surrender his left side jungle to the Sylas, and that would be perfectly okay, because he'd have rubber band here, and then even off of a recall, if Sylas immediately responds to the gank in bottom, by going into the blue side jungle, finishing on left side Scuttle Crab, Gragas can recall, Sylas recalls, meets him in the blue side jungle, and even though he's missing all the camps that were over here, he's able to get his rubber band Wraiths and his rubber band Golems, and so everything would be okay for Gragas. But the synergy between bot and jungle, not there if that was Gragas' intentions, and I'm assuming that it might be Gragas' intentions, because it looked like he was kiting to the right. He comes down into bottom right now, he flashes, they end up getting a kill onto Reckless. And now the teleport comes in from Reckless, and Lucian doesn't have flash, so they feel pretty bad right now, and the reason that they feel pretty bad and the reason that they're staying, because they need to try to make some sort of a play happen. Maybe Reckless, oh yeah, Reckless is unfortunate here, but the reason that they're staying is because Perks doesn't have teleport on Lucian. If Reckless and Hylissang get the push in on this, then it eventually slow pushes several waves back into Fnatic, and they know that this is going to line up for Sylas' path to the bottom half of the map, which means that the lane is frozen on this side, and you know that your Gragas has to go left side. It's a very awkward bottom lane state for Mickey and Perks, and lane state's just not that good. And then it ends up being absolutely catastrophic for G2, and the game is probably beyond repair. It looks like top lane is actually slow pushing into Whippo, and so this is a pretty big nightmare situation, because remember, G2, they want to get a lot of gold early so that they can accelerate and do all of that good stuff, but you also don't want to be trading kills. You definitely don't want to be losing out on the trades, and they're just losing out on so many different lane states. And you can see even in mid lane, that was actually bad by Broxa, and I'll talk about what is Oh, I guess actually it's not that bad by Broxa. Never mind. I thought that the cannon had a little bit more HP. Now I'll talk about something as a hypothetical, right? Let's say that this cannon right here had about this much HP or something, right? Let's say that it had considerably more HP. It would be perfectly okay to let this cannon get zoned out and die, deny caps, all of the gold and whatnot, because you know that Broxa doesn't have anywhere to be and he's just going back to his right-hand side jungle. And the other thing about this is that it's Ignite versus Teleport. So if the wave piles up way too big, Caps and Jankos can't actually kill Nemesis, and even if Brox is in close proximity, they get the crash onto the wave, it bounces back into Nemesis, then he has Teleport available, and then Caps is screwed. An absolutely massive wave up and top. It's really awkward for Bwipo. When you have massive waves like that, if you auto-attack the enemy champion, if they attempt to dive you or something, you just take so much minion aggro. It's one of the side benefits to piling such a massive wave. G2 are just so far behind right now. The gold score at the top only says 700 gold, but it's not representative of what's happening when you factor in base scaling and then the team compositions. It's an absolute shit show for them. Nemesis has Teleport, and he also has the first move onto Caps. And rather than actually take a team fight, you can see that Caps is moving down here. Rather than doing this, Caps has two different options. He can actually just either attack the plate in mid lane, or he can feign Fog of War pressure on the left-hand side, because you know that if Broxa shows down in bottom, it's extremely unlikely that there's any vision inside of left side river, which takes all the pressure off of Wonder, and it applies something to Bwipo that he has to respect the LeBlanc ability to roam when she has Flash and Ignite. So we'll hit play one more time. And just take a look at Caps. During this, he's wasting so much time. The fight's over. And we know that the fight was over from, if I rewind, you know that the fight's over from here. You know that G2 are able to actually just defend this as 3, and if this is the case, then LeBlanc should be walking further up inside of the lane and getting chip damage onto the turret before disappearing into the left side Fog of War and applying pressure to Jax. Well, the reason that Caps moves down is because in a world where Fnatic choose to keep fighting, despite both parties actually having choices and having consent over what will and will not happen, in a world where Fnatic does not want to force the agenda, Caps can't achieve anything. And in a world where G2 doesn't want to force the agenda, this is over for Fnatic as well. And so if we consider that, and we basically play the leveling process in terms of the ladder, what is the thought processes, LeBlanc would realize that this sort of a ladder step, etc., ends up arriving at her just staying in mid lane anyway. In most cases, if both parties are aware that the trade in the sequence should be over. And so if Caps uses that line of reasoning, he's able to deduce faster that there's no point to actually roam or go and do anything, and he should look to apply Fog of War pressure as well as get chip damage. So when I'm watching stuff like this, it stands out to me, and it's also very important that he doesn't instantly do stuff like this, because it should be the knee-jerk response, especially considering that we have complete information for both parties. And if you're watching a VOD review and you ever wonder, well, you know, you're watching a VOD and you're like, oh, well, you have complete information, so you make these comments. Well, it's not very hard to draw vision ranges for the champions in your head, right? Broxa can see to, like, here or whatever. So basically, when you're looking at champions, you just have to envision these imaginary circles around them all, and that's their vision range. And so when you make assessment of the situation, you try to look at it from both of their vision angles and think about what each party is actually seeing, and then just think about if the information that you're about to process and then spit out a answer to is fair. And so in a spot like this, Caps has complete information to know that he can just stay in mid and get chip damage on the turret before proceeding into West Side River Fog of War. Jankos comes over and gets the Scuttle Crab. Nemesis is recalling. Lane is awful for Caps. Bailed out semi by a Honey Fruit. Nemesis comes back. and hard shoves the wave. And this is actually pretty okay. Now the lane will slowly come back into Nemesis, Sylas left-hand side. Lane state's also very good for Jax now. It's slow pushing into Jax. That's a little bit unfortunate for the top lane state, especially because both top laners are still lacking teleport. Mountain Dragon is really important, and Jankos being down in bottom is very coin flippy. But let's talk about why. Well, actually, I'm sorry. No, it's not coin flippy. Wave's coming in. But this is already erroneous from Fnatic. So, when you know that your jungler will stick around left-hand side before proceeding back into... What they're probably thinking right here is that Broxah can clear left side, recall, and then come down. But the speed for this, the speed for this does not align with where they currently have the wave. So they should not have been looking to stockpile the wave right now. If they didn't stockpile this, if they had just pushed this forward and had more forward vision on the left-hand side, even though Hylissang doesn't have... Well, actually, no, this whole thing is actually just a fucking disaster. Jesus Christ. The more that I look at the size of the spellcaster minion wave, this is a really, really, really big problem. So we're going to go back even more in time to see where we prevent the situation. Where does the problem really start? And it looks like it starts right here, but we can't see. So, in a spot like this, the only reason that they probably don't insta-shove is maybe they're thinking that G2 are cheesing Fog of War. But if you do insta-shove as Xayah and Leona, if you walk up and meet the wave or something and insta-shove it, but again, we probably need ProView for something like this to see what their clicks are and what they're maybe probably thinking. In a spot like this, you can insta-shove it, try to get the crash off before this wave, and then it slow pushes back into you, and then it would be completely fine. I also don't know why it just zoomed out. Fnatic are so far ahead. This whole thing is a nightmare. You can't just hard shove this wave because then Perks and Mickey can just pull it back and then threaten to freeze it. And thus Jankos is actually allowed to come bottom, so it's not actually the type of coin flippy play that I retracted after seeing the size of the minion wave. Jax is up in top lane. And he's getting pretty good chip damage onto the turret. It's a interesting trade. What? We're gonna get a replay. Oh, game's over. Oh, the game should be over. G2 failed to get the kind of advantages that they would need, realistically, at this point in time. Although, Wonder is really fishing right there. They're going to be able to kill Jax, though. Jax is almost to Trinity Force. Akali is coming down, but this should almost always be met by Gragas, and so Nemesis does end up backing off. Sylas now on his Raptor camps. Mountain Dragon is pretty important. I don't know why it hasn't just been taken off the table. One of the things that they could have done way sooner... Well, it actually would require... Here, let me go to when Jax dies. So, rather than Jax just immediately... no, never mind. Because the replay is awkward. It cuts out the live gameplay. Roxas comes down into bottom. Akali's coming down too. Perks doesn't have any mana, so this is a pretty big nightmare fiasco. Hylissang didn't need to do that. I mean, this is stupid as shit. This isn't good play. This isn't aggression. This isn't anything. This is just stupid donkey play. That's really all that it is. Look at the minimap when all this is happening. Alright, you got 1 plate. You're going to get 2 plates. You have Broxah right here, right? You see that mid lane's about to reset. You have Jax doing everything that he is up there in top lane. You even have him trading, I believe, right now with Kled underneath the turret. So this team comp needs to get ahead. Needs kills. Needs economy at the mid game. You just got turret plates here. Your top laner is winning, and the mid lane is resetting with the left side scuttle crab. All you have to do is keep hitting the turret because Perkz has no fucking mana. So even though you would like to kill him on this wave, the reality is that on the next wave, if LeBlanc didn't end up coming, now you have confirmation of did LeBlanc possibly go left or did she end up going right, which means that you don't have to force this because inaction is action due to the fundamental nature of the team composition differences and how 90 cents or 80 cents for Fnatic is basically $1 for G2. Donkey play. Absolute nonsense. They're doing shit that they want to do rather than just acknowledging, hey, the only way G2 wins this is if we take even remotely semi-variance team fights or decisions like that. Now wonder, why is Bwipo... Oh... We have 17 kills at 13.5 minutes. And a lot of kills just don't need to be happening. Nemesis should never die there. And we look at why Nemesis doesn't need to die here, right? The wave is already onto the turret, so he knows that he wants to get over to it. Let's take a look at LeBlanc. Okay. Now, Nemesis teleports up into top lane. And then we ask ourselves, does Nemesis actually have to TP in this spot? Okay. Looks to me like Perkz is pretty dead without Nemesis. So this is one instance, and we know that he's TPing just for absolute safety. Okay? But in a spot like this, if you see Gragas and you see Pyke moving like that, he can assume that Caps is maybe recalled. But if you want to do this thing, which is just covering all your ranges, which basically just means that you account for anything, absolutely everything, you wouldn't just go back into mid lane right away. In fact, you would probably just stay top lane, demand presence from top, and then you would have Jax go down into mid, and then you would let Pyke just go up there, and that would be whatever. And that's the unfortunate situation that you have to accept. The only other alternative would be to take the safest route around from above red, in which case if G2 try to really flip, then, well, you tried to play around all ranges. Nemesis, hello. Oh, you didn't want a TP, but you followed the call? Yeah, the TP is bad. Fnatic can't lose the game in this spot. G2 are way too far behind. It's only a 1.5 thousand gold lead, but when you consider how much gold G2 needs more than Fnatic, it's so ridiculously hard to win, because you know that's going to be a little gold swing. G2 still doesn't have Mountain Dragon, and let's say that they stop everything right now, right? Let's say that G2, let's give them a couple extra camps per minute, right? Let's say that G2 can get 1,200 gold a minute, and let's say Fnatic gets 1,000 gold a minute, right? Let's say that Fnatic just stops everything, right? It's 14 minutes. There's no turret plates in the game. We're going to give G2 a couple extra jungle camps. We're going to throw in the Scuttle Crab and whatnot. We're going to allow them to capture an extra jungle camp or something, okay? Fnatic wants this turret to die. They also want this turret to die, which is completely fine because they already have the other turrets, because this will enable the defensive formation that we already talked about should be ideal for them, because the ability for Kled to perforate this side of the jungle when Xayah and everyone is just holding it defensively around this like little L that I just drew right here is really, really, really hard, and it's also very easy to play around with significantly less vision required. So if you consider how much better Jax is than Kled with less gold, if you consider how much better Sylas scales against this team composition than Gragas, if you consider how much better Akali is against this team composition than LeBlanc, if you consider just how much gigantically better Xayah is than Lucian, the only trade-off could maybe be argued for Pyke, rather than Leona, because Leona effectively is functioning as the same champion at one item, then this is a winning game state. This is a situation where fucking Fnatic bot offers G2 bot to resign. Because even if you allow this to take place, so per 5 minutes, G2 gets an extra 1,000 gold, okay? So let's jump 15 minutes into the future and arrive at 30 minutes, okay? So we arrive at 30 minutes, and let's say that G2 has, I don't know, we can even give them a larger gold lead. Let's say that they have 6,000 gold. Well, what does 6,000 gold really look like on some of these champions? Even if you divvy it up and give 1,500 extra to Kled, and you give 1,500 extra to LeBlanc, and you give 1,500 extra to Lucian, okay, and then you give 750 to Gragas, 750 to Pyke, what do the items really look like when compared to Fnatic's items, but also the base scaling of Fnatic's team comp and the way that the two team compositions fight against one another? Well, 6,000 gold doesn't actually look too hot. So it becomes really obvious very quickly from the pick ban that, hey, this team composition functions with less gold, which means they can actually lose out on more throughout the course of the game and actually be completely okay so long as they can prevent the capture of Baron pre-29 minutes or something like that. At the threshold or the breakpoint, which is going to be around the 3-item mark, it becomes too hard for G2 to win. And the scaling becomes too much more efficient for Fnatic. So if Fnatic recognizes this, their desires to get Mountain Drake, their desires to get Baron, their desires to get kills, their desires to make teleport plays, their desires to take team fights goes out the window, and ultimately the questions all just become, how can we get Jax in a safe position to scale up? How can we get Akali in a safe position to scale up? How can we swap to 2 blue trinkets on our ADC and whoever's in closest proximity to the Baron and top lane? How can we utilize less control wards than the opponent, which obviously means that you invest less gold into the control wards, and if you end up killing control wards for your opponent because you acknowledge the speed at which G2 can actually capture the Baron, even with like maybe 1 Mountain Drake because you're pro players, so you're able to play around it through Fog of War. You also have abilities that can even check brushes and whatnot. So in this situation, these things should be infinitely more important to Fnatic than anything that has to do with getting a lead or getting kills or taking team fights. Because if we ask Fnatic, well, okay, let's say that you have a 2,000 gold deficit or something, hypothetically, 3,000 gold, you know, whatever. Just give random arbitrary items to G2. And let's say at 23 minutes, if you take a team fight, Fnatic is still likely to win 65% of the time. And then I go over to Fnatic and I say, Fnatic, if you just wait 8 more minutes, if you just hold on for 8 minutes, the chance to win the team fight increases from 65% to 90%. Why on earth is your entire goal relative to how much your team composition appreciates? Why is the entire goal not to just say, okay, you can have 1,200 gold a minute, we're fine with 1,000, because we hit our break point faster than you? That's it. That's how League of Legends works. It's also how TCGs work. You can see it in trading card games. You know what? I'm even gonna fucking bring up DeepMind, right? Look at any machines or robots or anything that goes into strategy games and whatnot. Defensive play is always valued higher. It doesn't mean that there's not instances to be aggressive. Doesn't mean that attacks are not something that you do utilize, but there can be calculated attacks, like how inaction is technically an attack. By Jax saying, I'm gonna freeze, or I'm gonna make it so that you can't fight me. I'm gonna make it so that you can't get a team fight. I'm gonna play in a way that allows me to use less resources and less vision, but we're not gonna fight. Even if you kill a turret, it's only a couple hundred gold, you're staring down the barrel of a fucking shotgun because you can have several thousand gold in my team composition. I'm still gonna kick your ass the same way that when Defilers come online for Zerg, doesn't matter how many more Marines and Siege Tanks and Medics and fucking Fire Bats the Terran has, Defiler just changes the entire map the same way that the item and the base scaling breakpoints for the Fnatic team composition become so much more valuable. This has nothing to necessarily do with League of Legends. This is a strategical warfare decision that goes way beyond League of Legends, and you can see it in so many other areas of life, so many other video games. You can see it in so many board games. You see it in so many card games and whatnot. So this is very frustrating. But nonetheless, that should be what Fnatic is thinking right now. And Nemesis, you're in chat, so I mean, if you would like to talk about anything that I'm saying, or if you disagree with it, I would love to have the discussion with you. And when G2 wants to donk off like this, I mean, that's added benefit. Why is Fnatic... Let's take a look at something, right? Let's take a look. Okay. Kali top, right? LeBlanc dead. Someone has to respond to the wave, right? Okay. So, remember, Fnatic needs less gold. They always need less gold than G2. It's just the way that it works. They need less resources to win. All right. So, LeBlanc just died. Do you need mid-tier 1 turret to win the game? Is a couple hundred gold going to make you win the game? No. Are you realistically looking to take team fights around here in the foreseeable future? No. Okay. Does G2 need you to team fight and need to pick you off inside of Fog of War and need to make plays? Yes. They need to do that because they are the ones staring down the barrel of a shotgun, which is the superior scaling. They're the ones that don't have a clear way to end the game without overwhelming advantage because of the nature of the team composition. And that's where they fundamentally drop the ball in the first 3 picks of their team comp. So, if this is the case, you just killed LeBlanc, you have Jax down in bottom, you have 1, 2, 3 camps up. Okay, is Reckless going to get this red? I have no idea. But why is sweeping or anything, why is anything around here important? Turret's not important. This vision's not important. You don't care about this jungle. The fuck does this jungle matter? As long as G2 doesn't start the mountain, that's all that you're concerned with. You don't need to see any of this. This is irrelevant. This can all be Fog of War because it's irrelevant to you. What isn't in it is completely irrelevant. The only question that matters is, are they on the dragon? If they're not on the dragon, you need not approach this bush. You need not approach this one, this one. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be in the lane. You don't need to be anywhere. You don't have an obligation to be anywhere if they're not on the dragon, and thus you play around it as such. I don't know what they're doing. Why? 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 You had one job. It was just to wait. Just to wait. Makes no sense. Why is Nemesis having to come down into mid? Why isn't he just allowed to crash this next wave and demand that one of the primary carries come and catch it, or they lose out on several hundred gold and several hundred XP? I don't know. Oh, you got to get the Mountain Dragon. Right now, it's imperative to get the Mountain Dragon, even though you could have drawn one of the carries to the top lane, right? Let's say that Lucian had to just go like this. Catch this wave, he's probably going to shove out the next wave too. He would catch the wave, he'd shove this one, he'd probably stay around and shove this one. You don't need to be at Mountain. Not yet. And if Lucian does come up and push out this one, and he's all the way up here, Lucian doesn't have teleport. Now just capture the dragon. That's fine. If Akali shoved in this wave and she backed up and recalled, she can go like this as Xayah goes over and Xayah gets this, or actually Xayah's very low on mana. So Xayah can stick around for one more wave. Nemesis shoves in this wave. Nemesis comes back, recalls, comes here. Xayah recalls, Xayah goes to red, and after red comes into mid. And then because Nemesis had semi-prio in mid, maybe Lucian comes up, shoves the wave. Lucian recalls, tries to path into mid lane, but it doesn't matter. Xayah with red buff off of recall is now in mid, and then you have numbers advantage inside of this pocket, which then means that as a unit, and knowing that you have tempo advantage over G2, you can then proceed into the Fog of War. And nothing I'm saying requires human beings to be robots or anything. This is all very simple. G2 are just, they can't win. Just actually can't win. Good. Let the top turret die. Xayah's recalls are poor in timing, but it doesn't really matter. No. So this is awkward by Broxah, right? So Broxah, you can know that. All right, so Wunder wants to get the turret, right? Broxah doesn't have an obligation to defend mid-tier 1 because mid-tier 1's irrelevant. You already have several thousand gold lead. Get the Gromp, get the rubber banding going, and then Jack stays in bottom. Doesn't matter if you lose the mid-tier 1. Okay? Akali comes over, give Kled the opportunity to kill the top tier 1 turret because the position that the map then grants you by having the top tier 1 turret dead is more favorable to Fnatic's team composition. So Akali comes over and eats the golems. Broxah goes over and eats the Gromp. Broxah then recalls, and remember, it's 2 minutes respawn on the golems after you kill the 2 golems. So by the time Broxah ends up finishing eating the Gromp, you add, I don't know, 15 seconds, and then you add 8 seconds for the recall, and then you add a couple of seconds onto the fountain. You end up getting somewhere around 30 seconds. He starts moving over 30 seconds into the Raptor camp, and now all of a sudden, this rubber band and this rubber band are coming up in the very near future, but there's really nothing to fight over. So even though Broxah doesn't have anything to do, you surrendered the top tier 1 turret, you gave a little bit of gold over to G2, and now you can take the minions and potentially freeze them, because G2 do not have a very mobile way to do anything. You should just let Wunder kill the wave. You should always just let Wunder kill the wave. Or kill the turret. I know that you want XP too, because you just pinged level 11, but you should always just let Wunder kill, and then you should eat the golems, so that you rubber band them for Broxah. Stop eating the wave. Good. Let Cap shove. No? Well, maybe no. Alright, well, we're fighting with them. Why is Bwipo shoving? Why is Fnatic posturing around mid to fight? Do you want to win or do you want to have fun? I mean, that's ultimately the question. Does Rift Herald matter at 18 minutes? You need 100 gold. You need 100 gold. You need the Rift Herald to break the mid tier 1 turret at 27, 28, 29 minutes. No. Vision doesn't matter. It's all luxurious. LeBlanc's about to hand back a really big wave to Bwipo. Shouldn't be in mid. Shouldn't push. Shouldn't be in mid, shouldn't be looking for fights, shouldn't be pushing, shouldn't be doing any of this. I have no idea what that is on my screen. Your golems are up. There's no reason to get mid-tier 1. Bwipo shoving back a wave. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You can see that G2 cannot just arbitrarily push down mid. This is perfect. See that wave? See that wave up here? Just come freeze it. Alright, so let's have Bwipo come up to this. Okay? Oh, well, Cannon's coming. Okay, let's have Bwipo start the golems, stay in XP range. Okay? Now, let's say that this wave gets locked right here. Bwipo does the golems. Alright. What do you want G2 to do? Perks is going to recall. Alright, Perks is going to recall. Mickey X is coming off recall. There's no dragon. So if this wave gets frozen right here, and Nemesis, I know that you're in chat. What do you want G2 to do? Get mid-tier 1 turret? Good. Good, get mid-tier 1 turret. The gold that they get in mid-tier 1 turret is the net gain that Bwipo gets in top. The same amount of gold that they split up amongst each other, Bwipo will get more. What does G2 do? Do they take all their members and arbitrarily path through red side jungle and then unlock the freeze but be incapable of pressuring top tier 2? Because Jax just backs up for this and then eats the wave? They can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. Now they're wasting time on the right side of the map. They can't do anything. Now what's happening if Akali with teleport is down here freezing? What are they going to do? They're going to run over to Akali? She's going to shroud underneath the turret? Oh, they're going to die. They're going to dive mid tier 2? Okay. They're going to arbitrarily dive mid tier 2. So LeBlanc and Kled are just going to disappear from the minimap. Just going to completely disappear and arbitrarily dive the mid tier 2 without Fnatic having any inclination. This is coming, I mean, I guess. Nemesis is in game. GG. He's probably listening though. He's a really cool person. He's in the chat quite often. Good. Get mid tier 2. Or get mid tier 1. Why? Just let mid tier 1 die. Just let it die. Jax and Akali both have TP. Just let it die. It's a Cloud Dragon. You need to stop Cloud Dragon? No. What does G2 do? Their comp is so donkey-licious. Freeze. Freeze top. No, don't push it out. Freeze it. Freeze it. What do you want them to do? Okay, alright. Now, see, in a spot like this, they could dive. Yeah. I'm saying that before the Gragas cast even comes out. But if Xayah just waits for the wave to come up, the turret's obviously going to take a lot of damage. If the turret takes a lot of damage, it's completely fine. Xayah is able to play it a lot more defensive, and then Reckless even has flash. So Hillsong is dead, but this is a byproduct of stuff leading up to this. I don't know why you TP. I don't know why Jax TPs. Doesn't matter. Even if the turret dies, the turret doesn't matter. Turret can die, but it's also a byproduct of the things that just happened slightly before. They end up killing Perks, and I guess now you can Baron. Yeah, Perks doesn't have TP. Nice attempt by. Oh, that was a really good stun. That's a very free Baron. Really good by Nemesis. Yep. And that's probably game over. And now you just itemize defensive items, and the game ends. Because G2's team composition sucks. No, Silver's Valley. It's not a big deal. Ideally, they wouldn't lose the mid-tier 2 turret on that particular play, which was a byproduct of something that had just happened previously. Had they been playing to the breakpoint that I was mentioning, had they been accepting that their gold is more valuable than G2's, and playing a completely defensive lane setup and lane formation with blue trinkets and defensive control wards, as in order to use no info as info, if that makes sense. If you don't see a player inside of a lane, you can then play a series. You can ask yourself a series of questions to deduce where they may have to approach you from. Fast forward, because I just don't see a world. I mean, the game is over. G2 would need this gold lead right now to have a chance against Fnatic in the team fight. And even then, it would still be Fnatic favored. Reckless almost dying. Is the game over? Maybe they get Baron and then they end? G2 in a very, very awkward position. It's nice. Trade by Nemesis. And Pyke ends up getting away, I think. Yeah. Teleport coming into bottom. Now this is good macro response play. They can get 2 inhibitors. Actually, I want to see when they took the mountain. I guess they. Let me just see when it spawned. I do want to just comment on one thing, because it's really good. Oh, in a spot like this. Okay, never mind. No, in a spot like this, it's really good. If you're Fnatic and the game goes longer, you don't take the next Cloud Drake. even though you would have 4 elemental dragons and you would be able to get an Elder Drake, you don't need the Elder Drake to win. If you ask G2 what they need to win, they need a Baron steal, or they need a Ace into a major neutral like Elder or Baron, or they need an Elder Dragon steal into a team fight. And so when you ask yourself those questions and you realize that that is what's happening, you deduce very quickly that you don't have to do anything. So now, where's the error that goes wrong in this game? Well, the error starts in the first 3 picks. Pyke and Gragas are both semi-flexible. Gragas is sort of like red-white. Gragas is sort of like red-white-green in terms of colors. If you play Magic the Gathering, you'll understand what I'm talking about there. Kled, however, is pretty red-green with maybe a tint of black. Or pretty red-green with a tint of black if you play Magic the Gathering. But when you pick the Kled, you force the Gragas into the reddish nature as well as the Pyke. And when you run down the list of champions, they're somehow going to have synergy with these other champs. If you have an AP mid laner, then you end up hurting the red theme of Gragas, which is having the ability to just go double penetration and de-incentivize opponents to itemize magic resist, in which case he can deal true damage and be a real threat if you have double AD. Or if you have a mid lane champion that doesn't actually offer that much magic resist or any sort of CC or anything of that nature, so that Gragas can still be really strong. Obviously, I don't like the Sylas pick. I think the Akali as a standalone is completely fine, but there's definitely picks that Sylas could have been different. And then obviously still in the draft, I still stand by the notion that having the Lissandra is a much better theme for the Fnatic team composition, but the Jax ended up working out. There's definitely other champions that you can end up picking in a spot like this. So that's it for this VOD review.